Welcome to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman, here with Ryan D'Amico. Starting out with our NFL from the past week here, and we're going to start like we almost always do, unless it's a completely terrible game, with the Thursday night game. And this wasn't really a good game, but it was close until the fourth quarter that the Steelers were able to pull away. They scored 17 straight points there in the fourth quarter and won 40-17. Up until that point, it was a lot closer. So it was 23-17 until they scored those 17 straight points at the end. Marcus Mariota really hurt the chances of the Titans there with 4 interceptions during that game. And on the Steelers side, it was just domination from Ben Roethlisberger and from Antonio Brown. Roethlisberger threw 4 touchdowns, 299 yards. Brown had 10 receptions, 144 yards, and caught 3 of those 4 touchdowns from Roethlisberger. And that's just, when that's working, it's one of the best in the league, that Roethlisberger to Brown combination. Yep. Antonio Brown's just such an incredible player and just gets it done. They use him so well, and they use him so much throughout the season. He's just the most reliable receiver in the league right now.
Yeah, Zach. You know what's fun? You know what's great is when you have Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown on your fantasy team, and you win your week's fantasy matchup after the Thursday night game, which I was in that position this week. They got me 7 touchdowns combined, and I should have went back and looked at the total and see how much I won by, to see how many points I would have needed to beat him besides from those 2, because just a monster game. And it's funny because the last couple weeks you saw the Steelers kind of commit to Le'Veon Bell and say, maybe we're going to get away from the pass and just feed Le'Veon Bell the rest of the year, transitioning into a running team. And then this week they abandoned that right from the start, came out pass, hit Antonio Brown on a deep pass on the first drive and didn't look back. Roethlisberger has a big night, throws for almost 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Brown, like you said, catches 3 of them, has 10 catches. So, they can beat you in many different ways. Can that offense and the defense. Look, they turned over Mariota 4 times. He threw 4 interceptions. Mariota he makes me scratch my head, because there are times where he looks really good, and then there's other times where he hasn't taken that step this year that I thought he would. Mm-hmm. I didn't think he'd take a giant step, but I thought he would at least take a nice step forward and just keep progressing and keep getting better. But that hasn't been the case. And 4 turnovers, that's, on the road, you're not going to win games that way. So Steelers get it done, and I'm looking forward to that Steelers Patriots matchup in, I want to say it's 2 weeks. 3 weeks. Actually, it's 4 weeks away. It's December 17th, which will most likely get flexed to a Sunday night game. That game will probably be for the home field advantage in the playoffs. That's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, that'll be an important game with both of those teams sitting at the top of their divisions, battling towards the top of the conference there, and both looking good at this moment. I thought it was funny you mentioned with having Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown on your fantasy teams. One of my friends, I was just talking to him, he co-owns a team with another one of his friends, and he said they're obviously starting Antonio Brown every week, but right. Roethlisberger's had some struggles lately, and they were originally planning on benching Roethlisberger for Derek Carr. And It was just before the Thursday night game. One of the guys called the other and was like, look, I just have a feeling, I don't have an explanation why, but
nice.
Let's try and start Roethlisberger. And they paired those 2 together. And obviously the incredible combination. I'm pretty sure they led the league in points this week. Their team did. And they have a losing record right now, but that's a huge combination when you can have those 2 together.
Absolutely.
From there, we'll move on to one of the close games from this past week where the Detroit Lions beat the Bears 27-24. They had Matt Prater kicked a 52-yard field goal with a minute 35, which ended up being the difference in the game there. Chicago missed their field goal attempt at the end, which would have gave a chance to tie. The only reason this game's really relevant is the Lions are still in the playoff hunt there. They're sitting at 6-4. They have a chance at their division, but it'll be tough to catch the Vikings. So most likely they'll be battling for a wild card spot. The Bears are just one of those spoiler teams here. They've already beat the Steelers earlier in the year. I believe they beat the Falcons too. I know that was a close game. And then they've played some very, very tight games against better competition throughout this season. And that's a team I think could pull some upsets later in the year that it's not going to affect them. They're 3-7. I can't imagine a scenario where they make the playoffs, especially in the NFC, which is looking a lot stronger this year. But they can upset some of these teams that will be battling towards that wild card position and make life tougher for them.
Yeah, they go to Philly this week, so they take on the Eagles this week. Eagles after a big primetime win, blowout win over the Cowboys, which we'll talk about here soon. Come back home. Maybe this is a letdown spot for the Eagles. They can't take the Bears lightly because Zach, like you said, they did beat Pittsburgh. They did beat Carolina. They only lost by 8 to the Saints. That was at New Orleans. Almost beat Atlanta opening day. If they didn't F up the last drive there, they would have. So, and then they miss a field goal, a game-time field goal on Sunday badly, very badly.
It was bad.
To try to send the game into overtime. Look, the Bears aren't as bad as their 3-7 record shows. So give credit to them, credit to John Fox, Trubisky, that whole crew out there. They battle every week, and credit to them. The Lions, look, if the Lions want to do anything, Thanksgiving, in my opinion, is their season. Thanksgiving is their season. They play Minnesota. Okay, they get Minnesota. It's the early game, 12:30. It's in Detroit. That place will obviously be fired up. They have to win that game. Not only to get a step closer and a game closer to Minnesota in the division, but to get yourself another conference win. Because when you're looking at wild card tiebreakers, that's the tiebreaker is conference wins. That's the first tiebreaker outside of head-to-head, obviously. But you need to stockpile as many conference wins as you can. So that's obviously really important for Detroit. So there's some really, really big significance in that first Thanksgiving Day game.
Yeah, and Detroit still has the same holes where they just can't get anything on the ground. They're getting nothing from their rushing game from week to week. Every single week, this is their same problem, and they've got to rely so heavily on Matthew Stafford. What
is a bigger surprise to you? That the last 100-yard rusher for Detroit was Reggie Bush, or the fact that the Oakland Raiders don't have an interception this year on defense? What's a bigger surprise?
I was just reading that this morning about the Raiders not having an interception. I'd say it's close, but I'd give it to the Raiders. That's just to have 0 interceptions at
usually you luck into one, quarterback makes a bad throw, like a bad throw, usually, or a tip, you luck into one. I mean, they don't have any. That's hard to fathom.
I fully agree, because I've seen, I've coached football before. There's all kinds of weird things that happen. A tipped pass. I know one year we had a kid that he was kind of out of position and cut back towards where he's supposed to be and just kind of got in the way of the ball, and it was like he accidentally intercepted it. So there's all kinds of things that happen that just have never happened for the Raiders this year.
Yep. And the Lions, the thing that can't happen for them is they can't find someone to rush the football consistently for them. And until they kind of get that balance, Zach, to pair with Matt Stafford, they're just going to be the same team that they've been the last handful of years. So, yeah.
I fully agree. And we'll move from there to the top of the division. The Vikings have a 2-game lead on the Lions right now as they battle for playoff positioning. The Vikings pulled out a big win this week against both teams going in were 7-2, and now the 7-3 Rams in very decisive fashion, 24-7. The thing that impresses me with the Vikings, Dalvin Cook was good for them early in the year as their number one running back. Since he's been hurt, you don't know who it's going to be, which is frustrating for fantasy football. But in real life, it's great that they have Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon have both had huge games. And this was a Latavius Murray game where he had 95 yards, 2 touchdowns for him. And the Rams scored first thing. They had a Todd Gurley touchdown to go up 7-0. Yep. And the Vikings just took over from that point. 24 straight points, won 24-7 in that game. Adam Thielen, another great day. 6 catches, 123 yards, and a touchdown there. This Vikings team, they look good right now. I've been impressed with them. I didn't get to watch this game, but I know I've watched them a couple times so far this season. And I've been amazed with their kind of fill-in-it quarterback with Case Keenum. Not the planned starter, but he's looked good. Their running games look good. Their receivers have looked good. Their lines look good. Their defense has been good from year to year and continues to be very solid this year as well.
The Vikings, man, they really showed me something here. 2 things from this game. Minnesota's legit, and I think the Rams are. I don't think this is an overreaction. Some people might think, Ryan, you're overreacting. It's just one game. And I think the Rams we're going to see slowly start to come back down to earth. First with the Vikings, they just get after you from every level. First, the defense obviously is ridiculous. Zach mentioned that they allow the Rams and Gurley to go down the field, first drive, 75 yards, and score a touchdown. After that drive, they allow 75 yards in the opening drive, Zach. After that drive, the rest of the game, they only allow 179 points to the highest scoring team in the NFL. That's impressive. And I don't care if Case Keenum's the quarterback. He's doing fine. I mean, this is the 10th ranked offense in football. At this point, he's not just a fill-in. I mean, he has control of that team. They believe in him. He's not turning the ball over at an alarming rate. I know he had the bad game against Washington 2 weeks ago where he turned the ball over a few times, but they run the ball, the playmakers on the outside, and then special teams is good as well. Minnesota, I think, is a team that people need to start really taking seriously now that they're 8-2 and have a big run against the Rams. The Rams, the reason I say that I think they're kind of fraudulent and we're going to learn a lot about them is before this week they beat up on some really bad teams. They beat up on Houston, the Giants, the Cardinals. They have wins against the Niners, the Colts. You lost to the Redskins at home. Yet your 2 best wins at Dallas, that's starting to not look like that impressive of a win. And then at Jacksonville, which is a nice win, but nothing I don't think anyone's going to, jump for joy or freak out about. So, and then you look at their schedule going forward, Zach. It's absolutely brutal. You got the Saints this weekend. 2 weeks from now, you got Philadelphia. Then you got to go at Seattle, at Tennessee. I think we're going to learn a lot about the Rams here going forward down this home stretch, and I think they're going to kind of fall off a little bit, to be honest with you. How much, I don't know, because Seattle is kind of falling off a little bit as well. But, from this game, Zach, I really like the Vikings.
I definitely do too, and I'm in agreement with the Rams, although compared to some of the other teams fighting for a playoff spot, they've set themselves up well.
Correct.
By having this good of a record, sitting at 7-3 right now, that they only need a couple wins the remainder of the season, and they can clinch a playoff spot for sure, and maybe even the division, depending on especially how the Seahawks do finishing out the season here.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. That's a really good point. Is they did set themselves up and stockpiled those wins early to give themselves some wiggle room here going forward. So I'm interested to see how things play out for the Rams, because they started out so hot and had the number 1 point differential in the league, and tough schedule down the stretch. It's going to be interesting to see how things work out for them.
And this brings us to, since we just talked about the Lions, now the Vikings, it brings us to our first Thanksgiving game coming up here, which is a matchup of those top 2 teams in the NFC North. Vikings sitting at 8-2, the Lions are at 6-4. So it'll be interesting to see like we said, we both really like the Vikings and how they've looked this year. So it'll be interesting to see if the Lions can really hang with them there. Unlike a Rams team we saw with a similar record, but they're not quite in that position to hang with it. What looks like a top team with the Minnesota Vikings. So that'll be an important game for both teams on Thursday this week, with Minnesota playing against Detroit. From there, we'll go to our next game, and this one I watched a good amount of, especially the second half, but the Saints comeback against the Washington Redskins.
I watched almost that whole game. Oh my gosh. Definitely one of the craziest experiences of the week, maybe of the season, with that, just the precision of the Saints comeback there towards the end of the game. And you can take it on the first half, but because I didn't really get to see much there, but I was just so impressed with how the Saints finished there, even down by 15 points there in the fourth quarter, that they were picking the Redskins apart. And Drew Brees, incredible player. He's been incredible for years and years and years. And he was just, how he finished out 11 for 11. He was going with what worked. And it was easy to see between the two teams. With the Saints, Coby Fleener kept being open on the right side, and they kept feeding him the ball. Meanwhile, the Redskins, they got the ball. They hit twice in a row. Same thing with Jamison Crowder running and out towards the sideline, wide open. It works. They stopped doing it. Like, it's so funny to see a legitimately good team with the Saints, even though they put them in that situation to be behind, versus the Redskins that every single week they have some kind of suspect play calling or issue. And this game, they set themselves up to win it at the end and had that intentional grounding call. And that's a bad call. That's a really bad call. And the NFL actually came out and said, not that it makes it any better, but actually came out and said that was an incorrect call and it should have been just an incomplete pass. But go ahead.
Because it was just, well, number one, they set themselves up with that. And then number two, it was like Kirk Cousins didn't know the clock was running because he was making all kinds of audibles and adjustments as the clock ran down, and they ran that next play and we're out of time.
Yeah, this game, you might look back at this game, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but you might look back at this game as the game that got Jay Gruden fired. Because you win this game, you keep pace in the wild card hunt. You have a win at Seattle, and you have a win at New Orleans in back-to-back weeks. That's fantastic. I mean, that's great. I mean, I don't know many teams that could be able to do that in itself. And you looked great doing it against both teams. You got it done with defense against Seattle, and you would have gotten it done with offense and combination of defense on Sunday against the Saints. But really puzzling to me, the game was lost when they didn't get that third and short, which I mean, on the screen and down in distance, it's 3rd and 1. In reality, it's 3rd and a foot. Mm-hmm. And when that play call was a stretch to the right, when you need a foot and you're running a stretch play, which is a long developing play for one. 2, it's a very easy play for a defender to blow up, because all one offensive lineman has to do is miss one reach block and let a backer shoot through that gap, which is what happened. Manti Te'o, of all people, shoots the gap untouched and makes the play. I mean, that play call to me, when it happened, because obviously I'm rooting for the Redskins in that situation on Sunday, because the Saints are right there with the Eagles, and obviously I want the Eagles to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So when that play call happens, I got up and yelled, like, what are you – like that play call to me didn't make sense. And, like, real quickly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but what has happened to the quarterback sneak? That play is, like, irrelevant anymore. It's like, oh, we need a foot. Some teams are lined up in shotgun. It's like, you laugh, but I saw it getting back to Chip Kelly. I saw when he was with the Eagles. Christ, I couldn't tell you how many times he did that. And it makes you want to pull your hair out. That's one reason I liked Andy Reid. Andy Reid was like, we need a foot. I got Donovan McNabb, who's 6'5", 240 pounds. He'll get me a foot. And I can't remember one time a QB sneak where Donovan McNabb was stopped. In a situation like this, Kirk Cousins isn't anywhere near the size of Donovan McNabb, but I guarantee if he sneaks that, he gets the first down. Awful coaching job on Sunday by Jay Gruden. And tip of the hat to the Saints. 8 in a row. They're rolling.
Some of that, when you talk about the quarterback sneak, is definitely dependent on the player. I think Ben Roethlisberger's done it throughout his career.
Tom Brady does it, though, effectively. Drew Brees does it. It works. I don't care who the quarterback is. It works, man. It works. Especially if you need a foot. You need a full yard. Okay, I get it. But a situation like that, man, you needed a foot. Quarterback sneak. I guarantee it works.
Because I'm still this Redskins line is suspect. That
agreed.
I agree. It does give you a better chance there. Also, Samaje Perine was playing really well. I'm not saying their play call was correct, but feeding him the ball, I'm not completely against that. It's
not at all
compared to running it with Kirk Cousins. It comes out very similar to me to gaining that extra yard.
I would have much rather have had Samaje Perine running a dive up the gut, full speed, barreling into that line, a powerful back, Samaje Perine is, instead of him running a stretch play. That was perplexing to me.
And some of Kirk Cousins' decisions, like we mentioned at the end of the game, they kind of they make us overlook that he actually had a good game. Yeah. He threw for 322 yards, didn't throw any interceptions, threw 3 touchdowns. He looked good for the majority of the game. It was unfortunate he finished that way at the end of regulation with the intentional grounding and then not knowing the clock situation. Also, Samaje Perine looked really good there, carrying it for 117 yards. He scored a touchdown after they had lost Rob Kelly. From what I had seen, I didn't see this coming at all from Perine. He definitely looked good there. And unfortunately for the Redskins, they lost who I think has been their best offensive player all season. Chris Thompson's going to be out for the year there. And then on the Saints side, Drew Brees, so dominant. Mark Ingram he didn't get many carries. He only got 11 carries. Took him for 134 yards and scored a touchdown. He just dominated overtime. They fed him the ball and fed him the ball and fed him the ball and then kicked the field goal. That was all they needed. They just needed Mark Ingram pulling the takeover there. He didn't get a lot of action, but when he got it, he produced. And I've been so impressed with both their running backs, with him and Kamara this season. They have some great weapons there in New Orleans.
Yeah, they do. And the big one that really hasn't been talked about this year because of the success they've had on the ground is Drew Brees. And Drew Brees kind of showed everyone, look, I could still drop back and win us a game. Last 2 drives of that game, Zach, for Drew Brees, 11 of 11, 164 yards, and his only 2 touchdowns of the game in those final 2 possessions of regulation. So that's the scary thing about the Saints. Is they're getting that run game going, but Drew Brees is right there too. If you need him to pick you up, he'll pick you up. The one thing though that does concern me about the Saints is everyone's talking about their, the great defense. But look what happened when they actually played a team with a pulse on offense. Look at what they've done against teams that have good offenses this year. Against New England, allowed 36 points. Against Washington on Sunday, 31 points, albeit in the win. And then I guess you could throw Carolina in there. They did hold them to 13 points. But, prior to this week, they're playing Buffalo, whose offense has been bad, Tampa Bay, who Winston's hurt, Chicago, we know what's going on there. Green Bay, I believe that was the first game after the Rodgers injury. So Detroit, they allowed 38 points. So I'm still not sold completely on the Saints' defense. Offense, obviously you're sold. And they do everything right now. What Alvin Kamara has given them is great. Defensively, though, Zach, I'm still not sold, especially going into the playoffs. What are your thoughts on the defense?
They are 100% improved from what they've been.
Sure, I'm not going to argue
give
that.
credit for that. The second thing, they made stops at the end of the game. Especially, I was impressed with their decision when they scored their first touchdown. They decided to kick it off, even though I forget if they had 0 or 1 timeouts with under 3 minutes left. They were able to get that stop and get the ball back and not give up a first down there. That was basically all they had to – all they could not do is give up 1 first down, and they were able to do it.
Yeah. I hear you. No, I hear you for sure. And they are improved, and we'll see if they continue to improve as the year goes on. Real quickly, their schedule the rest of the way. I mean, they have to play offenses like Atlanta twice, Carolina, and the Rams. So we'll see if that defense is for real as they go down the home stretch.
Yeah, they're certainly not elite, but definitely better than what they've been, and I'd say in that average range this year, which is what the Saints need with their dominant offense. So from there, we'll go on to we'll go quickly through a couple other playoff teams here. We'll start with Jacksonville, who won 19-7 against an 0-10 Cleveland team. Jacksonville's sitting at 7-3. They have a great-looking schedule coming up. They've got the Cardinals, the Colts. One of their 2 challenging games is the Seahawks, then the Texans, 49ers, and then they finish playing at Tennessee against the Titans, who are hanging around in that division. But I think the Jaguars are going to claim this division somewhat easily now with their 7-3 record and somewhat of a not difficult schedule coming up here. So did you have anything to add on that game with Jacksonville-Cleveland?
Not really. The only thing I will say is you're right. It does look like Jacksonville will finally punch their ticket to the playoffs after a long hiatus there. If they somehow screw this up, that'll be catastrophic because in that poor division with a 7-3 record, with that schedule you just talked about, there's no excuse for the Jaguars not to make the playoffs.
Right, and Tennessee's got a much more difficult schedule, even though they're a game behind. And the other thing I did want to mention very briefly is this was the return of Corey Coleman for the Browns. One of their young players. He was a high pick last year. He had 6 catches for 80 yards on 11 targets. So if you're a Browns fan, you're hoping in this guy. He's one of the few bright spots they've got here. And from there, we'll go to what was a weird game, but we'll talk about it a little bit here because of the Chiefs being a playoff team. They dropped to 6-4, losing to an awful Giants team who's now 2-8. The weirdest thing that stood out from this game is on the Giants side, we had running back Shane Vereen throw an interception, and on the Chiefs side, we had tight end Travis Kelce throw an interception. 12-9 final score, ugly game in overtime here. I don't really want to go into that. I can't believe we had 2 non-quarterbacks throw an interception in the same game.
Yo, Travis Kelce's got a cannon, though. I don't know if you saw his interception. That was a bomb. But yeah, the Chiefs, man, I'm not sure what they're doing right now. I mean, they were the last undefeated team in the NFL, if you remember. Now they are just absolutely reeling. To lose to the Giants, I don't care that it's on the road. I don't care if it was played on the moon. You don't lose to the Giants. The Chiefs, look, I mean, they've lost 4 or 5. Man, they're reeling, and they need to keep an eye out for the Chargers because the Chargers, if they win on Thanksgiving against Dallas, that puts more pressure on Kansas City. Kansas City needs to get their act together here.
I fully agree. The Chargers. The Raiders are sitting there, too, in that division they're somewhat close. But I think the Chargers are the ones that have a real chance. And we could see one of the teams in the AFC West end up making the playoffs at an 8-8 record. Like the Chiefs have not been impressive. The other 2 teams I mentioned, the Chargers and Raiders, both have losing records and tough schedules coming up. So it'll be interesting to see. It might be ugly to see, but it'll be interesting to see who's finally able to win that division. From there, we'll go to the Patriots handling business 33-8 against the Oakland Raiders. Like I just mentioned, they're sitting at 4-6, same as the Chargers, behind the Chiefs. Still have some hope, but they've got a very difficult upcoming schedule here, and I just can't see this team making the playoffs here. You mentioned before about how they have 0 interceptions. Their defense is terrible. They just fired their defensive coordinator, Ken Norton, today. So they're trying to make some changes, but as you could probably expect, the Patriots dominated this game here. Tom Brady, 3 touchdowns there, no interceptions through the air, over 300 yards. Brandon Cooks had a monster game, 149 yards and a touchdown. The Raiders they're a lot of okay. They just don't stand out anywhere to me. And I think that's how they're going to finish, right around 6-10, 7-9.
The Raiders just not a good team this year, point blank. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They're just not a good football team. And you fire your defensive coordinator, you try to get a change. All right, I get that. But let's look at their losses this year. And let's look at the points the offense has scored in those games. Sunday against the Patriots, 8 points. Buffalo, 14 points. Chargers, 16 points. Ravens, 17 points. Denver, 10 points. Washington, 10 points. You seeing a trend here, Zach?
Yeah, that offense has not worked like
so
a lot
the offense isn't working, which is supposed to be your calling card with Derek Carr and Amari Cooper and Crabtree. You bring beast mode in, Marshawn Lynch. He's supposed to give you that running game that you're going to pair with those dynamic receivers, and you're going to score 30 points a game. Instead of firing your defensive coordinator, maybe try figuring out the offensive issues, because in the games you're losing, the offense is the spots that are letting you down. Score some points, Oakland. I think Oakland, they were in a very good direction. I'm worried about Oakland because all of a sudden they're getting back to their old ways with doing shit ass backwards. They need to figure something.
I'm not impressed with Oakland at all right now.
They need to figure something out because it's not going in the right direction.
Well, speaking of figuring something out, we'll move to 2 teams that don't have anything figured out right now, where the Bengals were able to beat the Denver Broncos 20-17. Bengals are now 4-6. Denver's 3-7. Bengals actually have a chance to make the playoffs in a struggling AFC. I don't see them doing it. But do you care about this game?
No, the only thing I'll say is in our AFC preview, I did predict Denver to struggle this year. Didn't predict them being 3-7 at this point. But look, you don't have a quarterback in this league. You really don't have a chance. And they're learning that the hard way. They start Paxton Lynch this week. Let's see what he gives this offense, if anything. He's got playmakers around him. Get him the ball. I'm curious to see how Paxton Lynch performs this weekend at Oakland.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see if that makes a difference. You mentioned they do have some playmakers there at receiver. C.J. Anderson shown some good things at running back, although not as much this past week where Devontae Booker led them in yardage on less carries. Plus, they have that defense that's been solid. They really need to find something. This is going to be the 3rd different quarterback they've started. And if that doesn't work out, former first-round pick with Paxton Lynch, they've got to go in a different direction, whether it's chasing after someone like Kirk Cousins in the offseason that could be a free agent or another free agent, or taking another high pick in the draft and admitting that Paxton Lynch was not a good pick there. And we'll continue our tour through the AFC West with our final team, the Chargers, pulling out a monster win, 54-24 over the Buffalo Bills, who continue to fall. We said when the Buffalo Bills were 5-3 that they had no chance of the playoffs. They still do have a chance. They're sitting at 5-5, but I can't imagine it. They benched their starting quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. Nathan Peterman came in and threw 5 interceptions. They gave Tyrod Taylor another chance, and just a dominant game there by the Chargers. All kinds of big numbers, most specifically Keenan Allen, 12 catches, 159 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's great to see after missing all but, I think it was the first quarter of last season when he had that injury. and he's putting up some monster numbers in this game and doing pretty well throughout this season so far.
Yeah, dude, the Rams the Chargers, LA team. The Chargers are, I think a team to keep your eye out on going forward. This was one of my surprise teams going into the year. They started out 0-4. I looked like an idiot. But look, all of a sudden, this team has won 4 of 6. And look, they get Dallas on Thursday. If they can win that game, that sets them up pretty nice, because then they play Cleveland the week after that at home. Then they play a reeling Washington team now all of a sudden at home. And then after that, they go to Kansas City in a very big game in the AFC West. So I'm going to keep my eye on this Chargers team and see if they can kind of get a little run in them here with that offense and the ball-hawking defense they have. On the other side of the ball, funny that this Buffalo team was 5-2 3 weeks ago, going on a Thursday night game against the Jets. And they got embarrassed by the Jets. And after that, it's just been all downhill from there. And look, rightfully so, Nathan Peterman has been in the butt of a lot of jokes the last 48 hours. And I get that. You throw 5 interceptions in a half, I don't care who you are. You're going to get made fun of. But I feel bad for him, to be honest with you, because we were talking before we went on the air here. I think this was the worst coaching maneuver, decision, idea, whatever you want to label it, of the year. I mean, for Sean McDermott, you're in the midst of a playoff run here for that wild card spot. Tyrod Taylor is not playing poorly. Is he playing great? No. But is he playing poorly? Is he the reason that you were 5-4? No. Is he the reason you had lost 2 games in a row? No. So you pull him for your rookie quarterback, who you're going to start on the road against one of the best teams at getting after the quarterback. That's just dumb. And that's not fair to Nathan Peterman. He clearly wasn't ready. He clearly was wide-eyed and like, holy shit, this is crazy. This is the NFL. I'm not ready for this. And I think what's even more idiotic is the fact that, okay, he starts him in this game, and then he allows him to throw 5 interceptions. After that second one, Zach, if it's me, after the second interception, I'm saying, Nathan, we gave you a shot. It's not working out. We're going to go back to Tyrod here. Maybe later down the road, if, we're out of contention, we'll get you some more playing time, but go sit down, get the tablet in your hands, and see what you did wrong. And put Tyrod Taylor.
If you're that set on him, feed Shady. Give LeSean the ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't put it so much in your quarterback's hand. We've seen that all season from Mitch Trubisky there in Chicago. They almost barely let him throw, it seems like.
So you're so right. Yeah, this was bad. This was really bad. And Sean McDermott deserves all the bantering that he gets going forward.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement there. And I can't believe this team is still relevant. We both talk about how much we can't stand this team. We don't think they're good. But the Ravens still have a good shot at the playoffs. Sitting at 5-5. They win 23-0 against a Green Bay team who had 5 turnovers, which 3 interceptions and 2 fumbles. Just a disaster of a game for them. This Ravens team is the worst in the league in their passing offense. And it's not like it's – because the Cowboys are one of the worst passing offenses too, but a lot of that is they rely so much on the running game. The Ravens don't even have a good running game. Like, there's just – their defense has been impressive, but they just have nothing going on offense. And I am amazed every single week that they're still in this playoff race. And looking at their schedule, they have a shot to make the playoffs. They play the Texans. They have back-to-back tough games against the Lions and then at the Steelers. And then they've got the Browns, Colts, and Bengals to finish out. They beat the Bengals pretty significantly early in the year. So that's 4 very winnable games, and they're sitting at 5-5. This is a team that very likely could finish 8-8, which in the AFC could be good enough to make the playoffs as that 6th seed.
Yeah, it's crazy. If the Ravens actually have 3 shutouts defensively on the year, um, and they're sitting there at 5-5, and they have a shot to get into the playoffs. That's crazy to me. Look, hey, more power to them. They find a way to sneak in, and who knows? You have a quarterback in Flacco who's been there before, and the defense shows glimpses. Who knows? But yeah, obviously they'll. I still think they're going to fade off. We'll see. But it seems like whenever they have these good performances, it's basically them just picking on, picking on poor teams. I mean.
Yeah.
Picking on Miami or picking on a Aaron Rodgers Green Bay Packers, so that's, you get your way into the playoffs, you're not going to be facing these kind of teams. So I still think that the Ravens are what they are and aren't anything special.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's a 183-yard game from Joe Flacco, not doing much of anything there. This is a team, if they somehow make the playoffs, they're not doing anything. 100% they lose first round, no question in my mind. So we'll go quickly through 2 more games here. You can add anything if you care at all before we get to the final 2 games of the week, the Eagles-Cowboys game and then Falcons-Seahawks games that stood out a little bit more. So first one's Tampa Bay winning 30-20 against Miami. They're both 4-6 now. Both not looking good. Tampa's led by Ryan Fitzpatrick as the backup quarterback. And then Houston beats Arizona 31-21. Again, both of those teams now sitting at 4-6. The biggest news from that, Deonta Foreman had his best game for the Texans and unfortunately had a season-ending injury there. So anyone who's got Lamar Miller in a fantasy league, I know I have him in 2 leagues, they're pretty well set there that the biggest threat to him is now gone. So he should be good to go the rest of the year. Other than that, I don't really care about either of these games.
Me neither. I have nothing to add. I watched about 10 minutes of that Tampa Bay-Miami game. It was so boring and so awful, just bad football. I couldn't take it. Turned it off. Arizona-Houston, I didn't watch a minute of that game. So I have nothing on these games yet.
Perfect. We'll move on to the Eagles-Cowboys game, which we were both looking forward to. I know you came away excited. I came away extremely disappointed. The first half, the Cowboys, it was an ugly game, but the Cowboys were able to stay in it. They actually had a lead going into half at 9-7. Definitely not an impressive lead, but from that point on, the Eagles just took over and scored 30 straight points from there out. They just dominated on both sides of the ball. It seemed like the Cowboys just looked very regular. Dak Prescott, 3 interceptions, really hurt. Jay Ajayi had a monster run towards the end of the game there, 71-yard run. Couldn't quite finish it and get into the end zone. But that I'm very impressed with that running back combination, and I think it is perfect situation for Jay Ajayi, who's had injury issues, who's needed time off from practice, and he's missed games in the past, that they have another high-quality back with LeGarrette Blount, and Jay Ajayi comes in. He only got 7 rushes this game, but he produced mostly from that monster one, and that's what they can do. And then they also had Corey Clement, who he scored a touchdown. He had 50 yards rushing, scored a 2-point conversion. One somewhat bright spot for the Cowboys was Alfred Morris looked solid. He had 91 yards. He didn't get into the end zone at all, but he looked somewhat solid. So they seem like they'll still have a running game. But other than that, just domination after halftime from this Eagles team.
Yeah, look, this game was obviously a tale of 2 halves. The first half, I was so disappointed. Look, the Eagles go right down the field, score a touchdown on their first drive, go up 7-3, and I'm like, this is going to be a cakewalk. This is great. They couldn't do anything defensively to stop them. Wentz and the running game was just picking them apart. And then they just got into a rut. I think a lot of it was the play calling by Doug Peterson. Got really pass happy there in the first half. Even though that first drive, they had a lot of success running the ball, he didn't stick to the run in the first half. Then went back to it in the third and fourth quarter, and we saw the success that the offense had, was able to pull away and make it become a blowout. As far as the Cowboys go, I thought what they did in the first half was very, very well done. They ran the football, stayed committed to it. Even though they weren't having a ton of success, they still committed to it. Led in time of possession. The only thing you could say is, look, they need to, and if they could have transferred some of those field goals into touchdowns, who knows where the game could have went? Because obviously, as a Cowboys fan or an NFL fan watching that game, the Cowboys settling for 3 field goals, I mean, in the first, that's not going to win you that game. So they needed to find a way to get the ball into the end zone. But the game plan going in that first half was great, I thought. And then coming into in the second half, they kind of got away from it a little bit. I thought they got a little too pass happy with Prescott. Obviously, they needed to pass as the second half got on because they kept finding themselves down. But you credit the Eagles. Look, they faced some adversity, some big-time adversity that no one played really well. The defense played pretty well in the first half, but the offense was just lost after that first drive. And they came right down the field, first drive, got a touchdown, got the 2-point conversion because the kicker got hurt. And then the next drive after that, Ajayi rips off that long run. They put it in the end zone again, and they never really looked back. So I think that shows a lot about the Eagles, the fact that they can struggle, yet they can still blow a team out, which is wild. And they just get contributions from everyone. Ronald Darby came back on Sunday night. He did a fantastic job on Dez Bryant, had an interception, knocked the ball away on 3rd and goal down in the end zone. He had a big night. And look, I'll be honest, this is the last thing I'll say, and I want your opinion on this, because as a Cowboys fan, obviously your opinion is more important than mine. You know more about the team and you follow the team more. But you never hear the term hot seat and Jason Garrett's name together in the same sentence. If it's me, I wonder about that, because Jason Garrett's been there a long time, and he has 1 playoff win. And to me, when I look at Jason Garrett and I look at kind of some of the stuff he does, some of the in-game stuff, obviously I watch a lot of Cowboys games because of the the division rival. I question some of the things he does. I'm not a big Jason Garrett fan. Well, I kind of am, because I feel like as long as he's the head coach of the Cowboys, that benefits the Eagles. But I'm interested to see your opinion. Do you like Jason Garrett? Do you think he's a guy that can, next year when Prescott has another year and Zeke will be back and Dez, maybe improve that defense? Do you think he's a head coach that can, take the Cowboys to a Super Bowl or at least get another playoff win? Or do you think they should go in a different direction?
I feel confident in him as a coach. I think if they don't have success again next year, with hopefully Zeke being there the whole time, I know we were talking pre-show. There's a lot of good teams there in the NFC. I feel like it's somewhat unlikely the Cowboys make the playoffs this year. And I feel like it's not Jason Garrett's fault. They've had some issues there when it comes to their offensive line, like we talked about last week. Injuries have definitely hurt them. Their defense has dropped down this year compared to where it was last year, which I know I expected coming in to this season. So they still have improvements to make. But I think I can't imagine blaming this year on him. I feel like there's a lot of other outside factors. I think if it continues next year and they're mediocre, or especially if they don't make the playoffs again next year, then I could totally understand them making a move. But I really don't put the blame on him at this stage right now. I think he's been a solid coach. Because I spent most of my high school years with them being terrible. They went through all kinds of 5-11 and I think 4-12 seasons. They went through some terrible quarterbacks. So I've liked what he's done, even though it hasn't gotten the results. And even though you say how they've only won 1 playoff game, they've been right there. They had that Dez Bryant's catch against the Packers. Like, they've had opportunities that just didn't quite go their way to get them to a further point.
Sure. No, I totally get what you're saying. I was just interested in your situation there, your opinion as a Cowboys fan, to see where things stood with Jason Garrett. But you're right. It's definitely an uphill battle now with 4 more games without Ezekiel Elliott for the Cowboys to try to put a little run together here. And try to get their way into the playoffs. As far as the Eagles go, they continue with the best record in the NFL. Looks like they will, barring something crazy, obviously they're going to win the division and get to the playoffs. It's just a matter of seeding for them, and if they can get home field advantage throughout the playoffs, have a very winnable game this weekend at home against the Bears before going to Seattle on Sunday night in 2 weeks, which brings us to Seattle.
Yeah, last game of the week. This just happened on Monday night, and this was the most exciting game of the week to me from what I watched. I watched a good amount of this game here, and the Falcons were able to barely hang on there, 34-31. The Seahawks nearly brought a full comeback. They were down by 11 in the fourth quarter, and they were able to get back in it. They had a late score. Russell Wilson, he looked really good there in the fourth quarter. He completed a touchdown pass to Doug Baldwin there. They got the 2-point conversion to make it a 3-point game. They were able to stop the Falcons, get the ball back, and they had a chance on the last play to kick a field goal. And Blair Walsh put it right down the middle, and it was the closest miss I can ever remember seeing. It was just under the front of the crossbar that would have tied it there and sent it into overtime. So great game. I was very impressed with, like I said, Russell Wilson's comeback there. I was very up and down with how I felt about the Falcons' defense. They were either one of two things. Either they were making a play, specifically putting pressure on Russell Wilson, making plays in the backfield, or they were giving up a big play. There's no in between. It wasn't like a bend but don't break kind of defense like we've seen from some other teams. It was just they're making a big play for a loss, or they're giving up a big pass play, letting Russell Wilson rush for 12, 15 yards. It always seemed very hot and cold with that defense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you're looking at, and this says something as an Eagles fan coming from me, which all the talk has been about Carson Wentz being the MVP the last handful of weeks. But if you're looking at the term most valuable player, because the MVP, I've had talks with a lot of people on different podcasts and just friendly talks about this. MVP anymore is just who's the best player in the league. That's what the MVP is. Not what the award says, which is the most valuable player. Who is the most valuable player to his team? It is not even close that it's Russell Wilson right now. I mean, without Russell Wilson, Seahawks have what? 4 wins, maybe? 5 wins? Because what he's doing is essentially saying, all right, defense is hurt. I don't have a running game. My offensive line is, blah. Receivers are okay, but all right, guys, don't worry. Just come on, hop on my back. I'll carry you. And that's because that's what he's doing. So to me, if I had a vote, I would actually give the MVP to Russell Wilson, because without him, this team is really bad. And he almost was able to do it again last night. Obviously, as an Eagles fan, I'm glad they lost. But part of me that like fandom in me was almost kind of rooting for Russell Wilson, because I actually really like Russell Wilson. Yeah. He is a fantastic kid. He's awesome player, fun guy to watch. And like I said, to me, I think if you're looking at most valuable player, it's Russell Wilson. Defense, that's going to kill them with losing Sherman, losing Cam Chancellor. Earl Thomas came back. They lost another cornerback, the rookie, last night. He's out. That's brutal. Still can't get a running game going. Russell Wilson led the team in rushing again last night. Leads the team in rushing for the season. As far as Atlanta goes, I'm still on the fence with them. I am. I mean, I've seen a lot of love the last 24 hours about them. They beat Dallas, and then they beat Seattle last night. Are they getting their swagger back? Julio Jones is saying. I'm not ready to say that yet. I'm really not. I think they're a beneficiary of beating up on a beat-up Dallas team and a beat-up Seattle team. So I'm not exactly sold on Atlanta just yet. Although they are situating themselves pretty nicely now that they're the 6th seed in the NFC.
Yeah, they've put themselves in a good situation. You know, I agree with you on not being sold on
Sure.
Atlanta. I've said that from before the season started. But they have been able to hang into it. They're sitting with that 6-4 record, which puts them in a great situation to be right there on the verge of the playoffs and be fighting for it throughout the season. No matter what, with how close some of these NFC teams are, it's going to be a battle right down to the end of the season to see who's able to finally claim those last couple playoff spots. And as you said, right now, Atlanta is sitting in the 6th position in a wild card spot. There's still 2 teams right now in the NFC that have winning records that would be out of the playoffs, which is Detroit and Seattle. Plus, behind them is Green Bay and Dallas. I don't think Green Bay is relevant at all. Dallas they're in a tough situation at 5-5, but they are only a game out currently from that wild card spot. So that's 4 teams right there battling for one spot that it's very close. So any of them could go on a run and take over that final position. It'll be exciting to see what ends up happening there.
Zach, real quick, getting back to that game last night, one thing we didn't talk about was Pete Carroll's kind of mishaps in coaching last night. I thought he had a couple really bonehead decisions that a lot of people talked about this morning. One being the fake field goal attempt before halftime, which right when it happened, I was like, I didn't get it. Like I don't like, and he tried explaining it after the game, but there's nothing that you can tell me, nothing that anyone can tell me to justify that call. Okay. You need points there. In a game where it looks like it's going to be a shootout, you need to take points. You can't take points off the board. You're going to get the ball after halftime. Let's get some points and get some momentum going into the half and then score coming out of the half. He tries to run the fake. There's 7 seconds left. Okay. So it's not like the ball's at the 2-yard line. I mean, the ball's at the 20. I mean, either Wilson's going to score or he's not, and you're not going to get anything. And it was terrible because it got blown up in the backfield. He ended up losing yards. So that was a question to me. And then also later in the game, he challenges what he thought was a catch, which was clear as day to everyone, that the ball hit the ground, and he loses a valuable timeout that he could have used later in the game on that last drive, per se, that could have had them have one more shot to get 4 or 5 more yards, and then that field goal is good by Blair Walsh. So some questionable calls by Pete Carroll there. Agreed, right?
I would definitely agree with that. The fake field goal is more questionable to me. I think the challenge, it seemed like he just listened to the receiver right away and immediately kind of reacted and challenged it. I think it was Doug Baldwin on that play that went immediately over and said he caught it. But the fake field goal, the biggest justification I could see is, I forget if it was, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Blair Walsh had that 0 for 3 field goal attempt game.
Sure.
Which, if that's something that he truly just does not believe in the kicker, you got to move on to another kicker. But clearly he does believe, he got the chance at the end with Blair Walsh, and he was so close to getting it. I'm in full agreement. I think those are questionable, and that's something that could really make a difference in the standings come playoff time, and as the seedings go for that, and how they finish at the top of their division, and how they finish if they end up having to go for a wild card spot, which as of right now, that's where they are. They're still a game behind the Rams.
Yep, exactly.
So for next week, what games do you have that we should keep an eye out for coming up? There's a lot of games starting on Thursday. Since it's Thanksgiving, we'll have 3 games there, and then we'll have the normal slate the rest of the week there on Sunday. Yeah,
I mean, the card next week isn't all that great. One reason it's not all that great is the injury to Aaron Rodgers takes away from another awesome would-have-been matchup. Green Bay going to Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football. How fun would that have been to see Rodgers at Heinz Field against that Pittsburgh attack? That would have been fantastic. But I talked about the Thursday, the first game on Thanksgiving, Minnesota and Detroit, that I'm really high on and I'm really looking forward to start off Thanksgiving there. And then you have to look at the Saints and the Rams. You have to look at that game. That would be my number one game, is that Saints and Rams game. In LA, a game the Rams really, really need to get there to get things back on track after losing to the Vikings.
Yeah, I definitely agree with those. Two other games that stand out to me that I feel they're more important than must-watch games, but I talked about earlier on Thursday, there's the Vikings-Lions game as they battle towards the top of their division. And then Chiefs-Bills, both having their struggles, and they're playing each other now. So I still expect the Chiefs to be able to win that. I'm just not impressed with this Bills team, and especially having to go back to Tyrod Taylor as quarterback here. But the Chiefs are right there on the verge of the playoffs. The Bills are in the running right now. So that's an important game for both of these teams. I do not, at this point, recommend watching it, though. Neither team is very, very exciting to watch at this stage.
You want to talk about a game that I am not going to watch 1 second of. I mean, one minuscule play. And it's sad because it's a primetime game. That Monday night game this week is dog shit. I mean, Houston at Baltimore, I have no interest in that game whatsoever, which sucks because I usually watch a fair amount of Monday Night Football. Like last night, obviously, I watched that whole game. If it's a good game, I'm probably going to stay up and watch it. If it's not, I'll fall asleep somewhere in the third quarter. I will not watch a single second of that. I need to figure out what I'm going to do on Monday night, whether I'm going to do something, whether I cue something else up to watch, but I will not be watching any of that game.
I have another game I won't be watching at all, which might be surprising, but the late game on Thursday night, I have zero interest in watching the Giants play the Redskins. I've watched plenty of Redskins games here being around DC. The Giants have looked terrible. I don't care whether it's a huge high-scoring game, whether it's a defensive – I don't care. It'll be one of those things. It might be on in the background, but I'm sure my family's going to be able to have some kind of ping pong tournament or some kind of game or do something fun or anything besides watch that game.
Right. I totally agree. Absolutely agree. Which is sad because, in a better year, that's probably a game we have some sort of interest in because it's NFC East rivals for us there. So, but yeah, I totally agree. I probably won't watch that either. I'll probably be asleep at that point.
Yeah, it's always on Thanksgiving there. Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback. As we continue to build this platform with our podcast, it's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.